feel free that in here you have also complete freedom.
Okay, great.
This recording is not like, there's no any schedule.
I think Jakob's telling me that I can like maybe break the fourth wall and talk to the camera. Is that I don't know, someone in the future might be listening to me now. I'm not sure if there's a future, but hopefully there is.
Hopefully there is. I looked a little bit on the internet to find out more who you are. So I found that you are a multidisciplinary arts practitioner interested in art forms stimulating collective idea generation.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit more about your background and what is your art practice about?
Okay, part of my background is like, the accumulated experiences I've had to this point. Some of those experiences, were probably quite possibly shaped from a very, very early age who I am and how I am. My mother, for the most of my period of growing up, was an art teacher. And so my memories of actually playing around in art rooms, and the smell of oil paint, and kind of probably fishing around in the art storeroom, and kind of like as a kind of child, quite strong memories.
Okay, so those influences were like coming since you were very little.
Yeah. Okay. And but then my father, like for most of my life, was a land surveyor. So there's probably more of a in terms of mathematics and kind of geometry, but also optics and kind of and this kind of and I for quite some time of my early working life was also working in that field with him. So this idea of being actually and this is where it relates to my current interests, is this idea of delineating boundaries. Like often surveying is actually a process of people working out like what is theirs and what is not, and kind of basically in a terrestrial way, and something in terms of like the division of land. There was this constant or ongoing process of kind of demarcation and borders, and where to put a fence and where to place a wall, where these limits are.
Or should we even put the walls?
Well, I think that's what's interesting about it, is that I think that the very process of placing an arbitrary line actually draws into question what it is that's being divided, and I think that's where there's this maybe an interesting tension between the two influences, like artistic opening up, open-ended kind of speculation, and then maybe the other side of this was the encountering the kind of often living environments, like having to kind of actually literally machete through kind of like places that actually had foliage and trees and stuff in order to be able to see optically a line through the landscape, in order to then place the marks for a more substantial line to be cutting through the landscape. And these are all kind of things that are reiterated through in a whole range of other ways through other systems that do very similar things, like they actually sever or kind of slice and cut up this continuum that we're in. Like we're in a situation where where kind of things are this might look like an arm, but like the actual or is it an arm? That's the arm. Is that the forearm and a hand? Is the whole thing an arm? Like basically just the process of language. Oh, maybe it's not a hand. Maybe it's fingers and a palm. Like is it knuckles and fingers and a palm, or is it so as language kind of slices things up and cuts things, like it delineates and kind of like categorizes. It kind of and this is what the scientific process does. It kind of cuts into and kind of severs, and of necessity to be able to analyze these individual components.
Okay,
And
so now
circling back around to like that's what is this the idea of cybernetics, actually how all these kind of individual parts relate to each other.
Okay, now I will cut
Okay,
into
yeah,
your
cool.
answer.
Okay,
Could you tell me what is your previous education?
Yeah, okay. Well, I did pursue initially like a music-related trajectory, because I think that music enables people to, operate collectively, and like even the process of playing music together enables you to kind of become aware of like others in real time and respond, and, collectively build things like songs, and have iterations of things that kind of develop over time. But it's not a particularly profitable or well remunerated. I then moved into having an interest in filmmaking. I went through a whole range of different interests in playing different instruments and different types of music. All the way through to record scratching with African drumming bands, and kind of like jumping around in front of the very heavy music. I wouldn't even call myself a singer. I was more like using vocal cords and a microphone and a whole lot of props to kind of entertain people in kind of live venues.
Okay.
At a serious seriously loud volume. But then then there was an interest in electronic music and also filmmaking, and that then kind of simultaneous to welding up large sculptures in a kind of a feral warehouse on the edge of the city for like large public events. These parades that used to happen in the late 90s or mid 90s, which were kind of a kind of a closing of Brunswick Street, and then kind of like these huge welded sculptural sort of floats. They used to be called floats that we'd weld up out of scrap metal and bits and pieces that we'd find, and something that looked like a Mad Max kind of landscape warehouse on the edge of the city. Through some of the processes of doing that and being involved as a performer in that kind of domain, I became interested in this idea of art that is in public space. So small kind of gatherings, house exhibitions that have a sequence of live performances as well as artwork. So it allows people from multiple disciplines to coexist and be mutually inspired by each other.
Okay. My next question is, do you consider yourself as established artist?
No.
Okay.
And I think an established artist is probably one that is that has become kind of a cog in a large machine and is not actually contributing anything particularly novel or different, but possibly quite useful. So I have become quite useful in whatever they've developed to kind of further kind of perpetuate existing power structures. So it's like I'd say that an established artist is and this is probably might be controversial, don't mean to offend anyone, but I think that if you're successful as an artist, it's possibly because you have been 100% instrumentalized.
In a second, I will ask you what is actually the success for you.
Yeah.
But first, we'll go right now to the second section, where I want to ask you more about your interests.
Yeah.
What interests you, not only in art, but actually also outside of it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that there's this question kind of really troubles that boundary, getting back to the boundaries. And I think that this is why I mentioned boundaries before is that it's actually, about interpretation, what to include, what to exclude. That's why I was asking at the start of this where the start actually was, because everything is contextual. And so, at what point do you define whether, what is art, what is life? Where is the boundary between things that should be considered to be symbolically referential of life, and when it is just life?
One of your interests that I saw also was this idea of gifting. Can you tell a little bit more about it?
Yeah, well, I think that there's in my case, and there's many kind of expanded theories about gifting. One of them is this idea of implied obligation that comes with the gift, but the approach that I guess the way that I tend to gift things is with something that comes with an obscure kind of reference to, like, it's almost like the obligation has been fulfilled. The return obligation is fulfilled by a however fleeting, like a moment of discussion or conversation that emerges from the gift. And because the gift is not of substantial value, and in some ways it might actually be of negative value, because it actually has inflicted some moment of requirement to think on a person. So it's actually like the requirement to kind of contemplate the meaning of the gift. Might actually be perceived by some people to be like an imposition. It's not advantageous.
Okay.
But so it's actually, in a way, I seek to strike some sort of balance between it being considered to be a gift that is actually has value, but also a gift that actually requires something of that person in the moment, in some kind of response. And in responding in the moment, I think that there's an immediate acquittal of any kind of sense of obligation, pertaining to that gift. Whereas other gifts of more significant value might be considered to be loaded with an obligation to return something for that gift. I consider these gifts to be so absurd and so obscure and so kind of surreal and in the Fluxus tradition of kind of absurdity, that they don't actually come as loaded with any kind of real sense of having to give anything back, other than to participate in a conversation. Because ultimately they are, intended to instigate the conversation and intended to open up the grounds for philosophical contemplation.
Okay, this is one of the things how your projects and some of the artworks are actually making these interactions with other people. How do you make it, do it that your initiatives are socially engaged? How do you, because I see that it's a part of your practice, but how do you make sure that it happens?
I think that this is where it gets into a much more difficult to articulate area of the practice, because it requires almost a state of mind and a kind of an openness to kind of almost what Jung might have kind of observed as being synchronicities, or kind of moments where there's maybe another sort of metaphor in a way, like those ivory kind of spheres within spheres that all have circular apertures in them, and then each sphere can be turned around, and there's moments when you can see all the way through the sphere, or there's all the way to the center of the sphere. I don't know if you can visualize what those
I tried.
Okay, well, so basically there's certain these scenarios cannot be. I don't think that there's a way of mapping and predicting when a moment of social exchange can actually happen, but it almost has to be sensed or felt at an intuitive level. And I don't think there's a direct way other than practice that you can build, build up an awareness of your intuitive awareness of of when those moments can happen and can arise. And I think that it's kind of just being open to the kind of these crossover points between, you know, their temporal, their spatial. I mean, it might be something that's in between you know, like someone that you happen to be waiting at the lights, and it's a kind of a momentary kind of encounter with someone that isn't deeply enmeshed in their phone, or isn't kind of already, you know, 15 minutes in the future worried about the next kind of thing they have to be at. They're actually they happen to be in this kind of transition, a sort of liminal state between events in their own kind of lives. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of very limited zones of that these kind of moments of exchange and social kind of connection can happen. But when they happen, and when they happen in a way that's not forced and is actually kind of quite, you know, kind of like
not forced? How would you actually force someone to do it?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I wouldn't want to be forcing people to do it, but it's almost like it has to be of a partly of people's own volition to participate in an exchange of awareness, you know, an awareness of, you know. Then this is that kind of, as I was talking the other day about, you know, the breaking of the fourth wall. This kind of, you know, that we're always kind of, you know, performing ourselves in the presence of others, even you, even you. This is the fourth, you know. So it's clear that. So it's those moments where the power differential. It's not like, I mean, you know, I could consider myself on a stage now, talking to you as the audience, and like, you know, and then, you know, me having some kind of like power differential, but I for the most part, and or the other way around, it could be like me hearing what you have to say, and I'm the audience, and you're the performer. But I think we can swap out. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. Okay. What are the questions? So I'd say, and that's good. That's an example of you being as open to, or hopefully as open to these ideas or processes or possibilities as I am, and it's actually an expression of the and it's an expression of the of like this kind of openness to the possibilities. And it's if anything, that's all I'm practicing. And it's not to say that I'm trying to, you know, teach you to be open. It's more that I'm trying to continue to keep myself open to possibilities. And it's also the idea that you know, it's in short, I'm trying to stay awake to being awake.
I see that you're very open-minded, and I will try to explore your mind even deeper on the third question. Sorry, third section. But right now I would like to ask you, you mentioned that to be successful you actually don't have to be established. And something I even, if I understood correctly. Yeah?
Well, no, I think that I'm saying by the established, sorry, the...
What do you mean by being established?
That's probably much what I mean by being successful. I think that if the larger system has elevated your status through whatever, you know, on whatever grounds, it's more than likely because whatever the artwork or the art process that you're pursuing happens to align with other larger kind of you know, larger agendas that are at play, and it happens that the artist is able to kind of fulfill part of the overall PR, public relations kind of strategy of a larger agenda that's at play. So I think that in a way, like I'd probably rather be an unsuccessful artist, unrecognized, and still be alive to the possibilities and things that are in the world, rather than having to be a cliche of myself.
So it was my question. What does it mean for you to be successful? So you said
in to continue questioning the rules in order to continue play, because it's ultimately, you know, people can seek to actually have a win-lose, you know, like a finite game of someone's a winner and someone's a loser, and look, I've got this many gallery shows, you've got less gallery shows than me. Oh, look at, I'm on the Biennale circuit, you're not. My ego is bigger than you because I've got, So and that is the the opposite to how that would be it might be monetarily successful, but it's actually on many levels it's actually total failure. I mean, because that's actually there's a closing down of possibilities. There's a
you limit your options just to see, oh, this is works, so we just go that way.
And there's plenty of artists that have can be seen to have been crushed by that success. I mean, I think that's in ways. I mean, that's the idea of Jimi Hendrix. Like, Jimmy, we paid for you to play, to smash your guitar and burn it. Like, we want to see kind of we want to hear the classics. We don't want want this new experimental stuff. And it's so there's probably a balance because you still want to be able to be actively involved in a creative community of people, but I think that there's a great danger in kind of developing a style that then you become tied to and expected to reproduce. And I think that's actually, if possible, resisting being kind of reduced to a kind of like a cliche is actually probably a big part of what I would consider personally what is.
My next question is, what artists, or maybe not even artists, have inspired you, or you see that big influence on your practice?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is the whole trajectory of artists through from, I'd say there's
only three. You can just
only three. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether. I think that there's maybe I think there's aspects of data, surrealism, and fluxus that would actually be kind of primary kind of influences on how I contemplate and consider like what I do. That's from an artistic perspective.
Okay.
I think that there's having said that, I think that there's aspects of what Boyce was on about that I think are very interesting as far as the social sculpture. There's some what I think are very exciting kind of extensions, I guess, of some of the things that were initially opened up through data. And I think that the playfulness. I think that this actually really is the playfulness of keeping things in play. So rather than the kind of reduction of things to a rule set, like the idea of how can we bend the rules to enable continued play, and I think that that's actually quite exciting.
Playfulness. You want to only play. We have to be serious. So my next serious question is: what is your favorite type of pizza?
Wow, I've currently got I'm a special needs kid. Like in terms of my dietary requirements, so pizzas are not as good for me as they used to. So I'm probably, even though most pizzas are about as nutritious as the box. But having said that, we have been looking at pizza boxes as being the basis of a new art journal, so that people can contribute by just putting loose leaf kind of additions in these pizza boxes, and so we'll talk a bit more about that because I think you'd probably be a good contributor to this new art channel.
Right.
So maybe that's my favourite pizza is the pizza, and we actually as a gallery opening recently. We actually, well, not a gallery opening. We've been doing these gallery closings, which is sort of the last 2 hours of a show. Where it's have like a very chilled out gathering of people and eat pizza, because I haven't been able to eat pizza, I was just providing triangular pieces of paper for people to write down their ideas on, and so that was food for thought.
Okay, that was much more surprising answer than I expected. Okay. Do you have any work habits to make sure that you stay focused on your creation process? process?
Yeah, I think it's probably the approach is to kind of where possible kind of avoid being too focused. Like I think that maybe that sounds a bit kind of odd, but I think that when I seem to I seem to arrive at better outcomes by not imposing a concept on things, but being like receptive to possibilities as they change, so that I'll kind of get a feel of what might be possible and sort of try to, as much as possible, allow the kind of conditions that exist to kind of provide like solutions for and kind of contributions to that, to how that might proceed. Because if I find that in terms of work, different types of work, artwork, is that if I have an idea and then I try to impose that idea on the material world in some way, then somehow I always find that the material world, the material conditions will kind of like disprove my kind of initial kind of concept.
But sometimes it can like evolve.
Yeah, it's a back and forth. Yeah, it's a back and forth thing. I think there's a dialectic kind of
it's part of the feedback process.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that I don't know if that's really answered your question, but I mean, basically my resistance to kind of to kind of work as in work that might be considered to be consistent output is such that I think that maybe a different way to answer the question is back when Henry Ford was establishing production lines, he'd actually look for the lazy people on the production line, because the lazy people were actually working out like ways of kind of making the job easier for them, but it was also a way of like efficiencies being identified.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So because they'd find out some easier way to do their job, and then he'd be able to incorporate that back into the system to make it more efficient.
That's interesting.
And I think that I'm trying to do that often. Like I'm looking for a lazier way so that it can guide me as to how I can do something more efficiently. But at the same time trying to be able to divert that extra time and energy that I have from finding an efficient process to do something that I actually want to do.
But then you're not lazy anymore. You're not lazy anymore.
Maybe I'm lazy about being lazy. It's like
Oh, okay. I will try to experiment with that. Before we go to the third section, I have one more question from the previous approach. Soon I'm going to leave my university. Hopefully I will graduate. Who knows?
Right.
And my friends will also. What advice would you give to us to make something happen with our art, to find a job or to establish ourselves or to like make a living with our art? Specific advice.
Specific advice. Well, I mean, there's two different aspects to this. I think that the far more valuable aspect of having done art and chosen art is the fact that exactly when I'm getting to the most important part. Like
someone is doing something more important.
It's like or more noisy. Like we can get some signal from the noise floor here. But I think the far more important aspect of having chosen art is the fact that you have hopefully will through going through this process will be more adept and more kind of capable of effectively meta programming, like actually having the capacity of reprogramming who you are in a way that you actually to be a better version of yourself, like as in it, and are more capable of having agency in that existential kind of making of oneself, like the idea that that as a that you're not just a received pattern of behavior that has been kind of the result of your cultural influences and stuff, that you actually have learned through your art practice to be able to
explore your own identity.
not just explore, but actually encode that at a fundamental embodied level, and be able to then continue to keep rolling. Should we keep rolling? Should they keep rolling? And continue to kind of like to develop that. I mean, it's basically like you've got all these drawings or paintings, images on the wall here that are. I was speaking to one of your fellow artists yesterday about the idea of neurographic imagery. Like, these are all in some way, shape, or form an expansion or an extension of your neurology. Maybe even your kind of.
This is mind up.
Yeah.
So mind ups are actually.
Yeah. So it is. So it is a neurographic, like a writing of the neurons, a writing of the. But I think that process of utilizing art as a feedback loop that allows you to listen to your intuitive self, like your body's response to the world, which is possibly more, it is more correct than the ego state or the prefrontal cortex's imposition of patterns on the world. So it's actually like this, and it's not to say we can do without our egos. It's, I think that we just like to kind of humble that the ego's kind of like imposition of patterns on the world, and sort of listen to what our body is thinking and how our body reacts to the world. And I think that using art to actually be able to listen to our bodies in whatever way, whatever medium we choose, and I think that the medium ultimately is neuroplasticity, and that's a whole another kind of conversation. But I think that hopefully is what you will have gained from this experience. Because that is actually an incredibly valuable insight to be applying to whatever you do after this. And I think that it's like success beyond this, and that's what I was saying about being a successful artist might not necessarily be being a successful person in the world. Being a successful person, I think, is actually a far more holistic approach to possibly the spiritual dimension, without looking at the religious side, but more the spiritual sort of, in a post-human kind of idea of like how we relate to all other living systems and all other kind of sentient forms of life, or kind of like, all manner of possibilities. All those things are kind of opened up through this encounter with artwork that enables us to kind of free ourselves from like quite narrow thinking structures.
I used to play a lot with my neuroplasticity of my brain, but recently I got a little bit lazy. But thank you for this reminder. Yeah, I will go back to it. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we still have some time. Ooh. Actually, we don't have much time. It's already 12 past.
So we're coming down into the
Not yet. I have a few very quick questions.
Yeah.
If you answer them very quickly, then we do this. Okay. So now going to your creative mind.
Yeah.
This one will be too long.
No, it's alright. It's just we
can try. If you answer very quickly, then we can try.
Okay.
I've noticed that you're questioning a lot the world around you.
Yeah.
what are the questions that you are very passionate about?
Yeah.
Maybe you can just ask them.
Yeah, well, I mean, the big, I mean, I'm someone who is probably perceived by a lot of people as being what has come to be known as a conspiracy theorist. I don't think of myself as a conspiracy theorist, more a conspiracy realist, like someone who actually is kind of seeing patterns of behavior and kind of the way systems operate on multiple levels, and how they appear to have operated across historically. And
from all our conversations, you don't base your knowledge on any false facts. You're just exploring and thinking. So actually, I don't see any conspiracy.
Yeah, other than the kind of the etymology of conspiracy being to breathe together, and I think we're probably, like in a technical sense, we're probably breathing, the same air and breathing together, like, but I think that there's maybe I'm thinking that there's probably some ways of thinking about the generative aspects of breathing together or co-inspiration. And I think it's possible to actually to establish a kind of, what has been called by a number of theorists, and it stems from Spinoza's ideas of an affirmative ethics that is actually kind of it's almost like so this is getting back to my question, whether or not we can arrive at a kind of form of anarchism that relies less on these external imposition of rule sets and structures, but requires a very nuanced sense of a range of different requirements that people have to be in the world, and so a capacity for people to actually have a really sensitive understanding of their boundaries and the boundaries of their behaviour and their effect on others, so that there can be a co-emergence of abundance, because I think there is actually a capacity for great abundance in the world, but that requires like this really deep level of self-awareness to arrive at. So these are the kind of questions I'm interested in. Yeah.
Okay. Next question, very fast. How do you begin to create artworks? What is your creative process, or do you use any creativity techniques?
I think that there's. I'm quite interested in, even though like Arthur Koestler there was some bad behaviour that was enacted in his life that is understandably shouldn't be kind of I can understand why there's aspects of his work that is not kind of foregrounded at this point, because is not, some of his attributes were unfavourable, but I think that some of his thoughts on creativity were actually quite interesting, and I think that these ideas of bisociation, where you actually the kind of intersection of plane, or he described them as kind of this intersection of planes that were previously unlinked that become linked through the creative process. They can be they can be very quick to come together and result in sort of almost humour, like jokes, where two different angles of thought are kind of like, or frame switching that enables us to think about the world in a different way that is spontaneous and brings about laughter. But then there's a slower way of bringing them together that brings about the aha scientific moment of discovery, and then there's the kind of, so there's the ha moment, there's the aha moment, and then there's the moment, and the is like the aesthetic, artistic kind of like understanding of these kind of bringing together of things. Okay, so I think that my artistic process, of getting back around to your question, would be to have like this vast kind of sprawling, unorganized library, apparently unorganized, but there's all these kind of books that appear near each other that are actually like intersections of planes that weren't previously linked, that just the fact that they appear near each other, and the titles that might trigger synaptic kind of misfirings that actually open up new pathways of thought, or collections of objects that all happen to be intermingled and like will bring about kind of previously unconnected avenues of thought that are actually often relate to the way that puns kind of like enable a crossover between things that look similar, or metaphors that allow two different kind of things that weren't previously seen to be similar to kind of like somehow to be collapsed into one another. And it's to a certain extent, this is like it's like a cognitive synesthesia, like a sort of an intellectual synesthesia, where it's actually like you actually bring about like a thought that happens over here that because you smash some sort of semiotic regime like in a hadron super collider of like linguistic pretzels. Something like that.
Two more questions, very quick, as all the previous ones, or maybe quicker.
Yeah.
What are your dreams and aspirations?
Well, I think that's the part of my dreams and aspirations are that the insights that I've actually, have arisen through my, existence in this world, in this lifetime. Maybe there will be other kind of incarnations. I can't say that there isn't a transmigratory soul. Who knows if with some of the uploading of consciousness into kind of.
We're getting close to it.
Yeah, well, that's right. So it's who knows, like what as I said at the start. Hopefully there is a future, but I think that there's. So in terms of dreams, like what are my dreams? I think that I feel very much like, day-to-day existence is already a dream, and I think that if we can arrive at a more lucid form of daydreaming, where we're actually able to have a collectively generative effect on the dream that we're able to have together, without feeling like we're actually tied too much together, because I think there's this necessary, ultimately a necessary kind of balance between the one and the many, between having everyone in some kind of totalitarian hive mind, and having the absolute and utter kind of abundance that emerges from diversity and kind of and difference. And I think that's my dream, is that the insights that I've been fortunate enough to experience can be kind of in some way passed on to be useful to others, and that's kind of just as a that's part of the enjoyment that I get, is actually putting them in a form. But putting them in a form that can actually be communicated.
It is also. You express it also in art. So actually, this is how, through these interactions, not only you providing your experiences, but letting others to experience something, you share these desires inside you, actually.
Yeah, and I think that there's primarily, I'd say, a dialogue or a kind of meditation between me and my art, me and the art processes that actually.
It can go even deeper.
That's so there's the journey inwards, and then the journey sort of or the aspiration of bridging between people external to me. And I think that there's sort of both happen simultaneously. So I think that there's and I think that's kind of I guess the dream is that to be not sliding too much quicker than we already are into the nightmare of loss of agency, loss of kind of independent thought, in the capacity to kind of to kind of operate as kind of individuals that have kind of awareness of others, rather than and the nightmare of being actually subordinated to kind of a tyrannical system of kind of surveillance and control that actually eviscerates and closes down all those capacities for creativity. So
I'm sorry, thanks for I'm just
yes.
funny thought centers in my mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, these are very real closures and kind of of all the great things that actually make us, I think, interesting beings, and to actually to trade off, a sense of security and a sense of kind of certainty for all of the amazing things that come with being open to uncertainties and open to the possibilities of uncertainty is actually, that's my dream, is to continue the dream and not have it turn into that kind of nightmare.
Cool. Last question.
Yeah.
What are you working on at the moment? Not right now. But.
Okay. Well, I'll see. I just wrote up I can probably read out this. Okay, so this is a performance. This will be a performance.
You are VIPs.
VIPs. This is probably yet to be announced. But okay, so the title for this is Shutter Release, but it's SHH. and then slash utter. So it's like, silence and then utter, like to utter something is to kind of articulate it. But then obviously when they're connected, it's the shutter, ching ching. So there's the shutter, so it's like very camera orientated. So, okay, so shutter, so shutter release. So the shutter release is the pressing of the button that is on top of the camera to release the shutter. Ching ching, ching ching, like that. So this is a performance lecture. So a performance lecture that seeks to zoom out. So zooming out, but is that the zoom? Maybe it's the zoom that we're actually trapped in across COVID. It's the zoom. Okay, so the performance lecture that seeks to zoom out of online mediation through a surreal time juggling of sculptural photographic assemblies and linguistic pretzels in an attempt to reframe the breakdown of the bicameral mind. So I don't know if that's if that kind of makes, I don't know if that's even possible to zoom into, but that is actually a performance lecture that we'll be using. I'll see if I can find a picture of the, there we go. We'll be using a number of cameras that are actually photographic, as well. They're really kind of assemblages of different cameras that have unusual objects connected to them. The phone camera, you probably saw them.
Yeah.
But it's the idea of being able to talk about the imposition of certain kind of modes of thought on us as through the regime of photographic technology, through the regime of the apparatus of the technical image ultimately, but as a metaphor for consciousness, but also as it relates to the bicameral mind. So the bicameral mind, there's a book called The Breakdown of Consciousness and the Origins of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, a book by Julian Jaynes, which sort of talks about this idea of a different form of consciousness 3,000 years ago where people actually had voices in their heads, much like a schizophrenic kind of condition, and created oracles or actually created sculptures in order to situate those utterances, and through this process actually slowly developed the sense of I that they actually internalize, and sort of so you be able to have that internal narrative actually located around the idea that you actually have a subject, like an internal subject, and you actually become a subject, and then the further kind of development of photography, like 3,000 years later, to actually situate us in space and time, and the effects that has on limiting other forms of knowing and being. So that's a kind of that's what I'm currently kind of playing around with. But then also developing a part of a conference paper that's actually asks is neuroplasticity my art medium? That's kind of the question of the presentation. Yeah. So that's those are a couple of things that I'm working on.
Well, there are many ideas, and throughout this whole interview, there are so many other ideas. So, in a few days, I'm going to sit on the other side of the screen and try to analyze all of them, because this is like a deep mind to explore. So, thank you very much.
Cheers.
I hope that you will have a great day.
Will do.
And we will stay in touch.
Cheers.
Thank you. We're going to start with the most difficult question.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
I don't know. Maybe just the very fact that you're asking if I'm ready possibly means that I'm not.
Okay. So please tell me, and you have to be completely honest.
Yeah.
What is your favorite color?
Well, it is actually, or it has been, green. Actually, it's I think consistent. So it's good that you're wearing green pants today. I know, so am I actually. I've got the green camouflage. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Okay. So there you go. That's
okay. And now we have other questions.
Okay.